back in the lab with my good friend Eric Garnicki. And, I wanted to have Eric in because as a lender in Northern California, where I'm from, Northern California, it's a very different marketplace than Southern California is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times what happens in our industry, and I was just having another guest on, Brandon, where we were talking about market conditions and mindset based on geographic locations. It's a lot of social psychology that goes on in every individual market.
Yeah.
And being that you're from the Bay Area, having a different type of clientele than we typically have in Southern California. Because Southern California, we have a lot of military folks. Affordability is a lot different here.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot more engineers.
Yeah.
You got a lot more people from like Southeast Asia. I got to believe that the negotiating with transactions is completely different, just from cultural standpoint.
100%. And especially, for example, clients from India, depending on the parts of India they're from, will determine how much to negotiate. Southern Indians are very, very different in their cadence and style and how they negotiate versus, say, Northern or Central.
Yeah. And we don't have a certain amount of appreciation for that. We do in certain markets, don't get me wrong. If like for us here, if we're in the coastal kind of market, it's much more rate sensitive, a lot more savvy individuals. You got more high net worth. They have a lot more options.
Yeah.
And when you have more options, you have much more ability to negotiate. Right. So,
Yeah.
but partially of that though, you do have that cultural difference that does roll into play.
Yeah. Yeah. And they ask the right question. I look like first time home buyers, right? People who are not normally used to buying homes. They don't know the right questions to ask. When I find with Indian people or Asians or Southeast Asians, they know exactly what they want to ask, right?
Yeah.
They get to the point and they come, it's a whole, I think it's a more educated and a fluent approach than I'm normally used to when I find it's outside of the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Plus, I mean, you have the mindset of an engineer.
Yeah.
An engineer is a complete different analytical model of the way that they look at, especially finances.
Yeah.
And in my world, sometimes, I mean, the paralysis analysis.
Yeah. What's
$100 here and $80 there? Which, I mean, ironically, yeah, you should know every single dollar spent on a transaction.
Yeah.
However, there is a big difference, especially when dealing with some first-time homebuyer clients that we're typically used to that are just happy to get into a home. Mm-hmm. And they really trust you emphatically through the whole process, which is scary. It's a double-edged sword for them personally, because if they don't have a good advisor that's walking them through the process, they can get taken advantage of in some cases, especially individuals like we have the border right here across. So I have a lot of foreign national buyers, resident alien transactions. They're very different versus clients that I get from like Qualcomm. Mindset wise,
Yeah.
not just ethnically wise, but mindset wise is a little bit different model. But what's crazy for you, bro, and to segue something else, because now you have this difficult model that you're playing in, but you're one of the few guys I know, bro, that travels as much as you do. How many countries have you been in?
To date, 54.
50. Bro, I just told my buddy, I think he's been to like 40 countries.
Yeah, 54, man. We had a goal, my wife and I, to travel as much as we can before kids, and we just hit the 50th country, just shy of COVID.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it's a big passion of mine, and I've learned to if we know my wife's an engineer,
Yeah.
so she takes a very engineering approach to it. So how can we get to where we want to go in the most efficient time possible? Knock out what we want to do there, right? So if you go to say China, you're gonna go to Hong or Shanghai, Great Wall of China, all these landmarks, right? How do you get there efficiently and then maximize the trip and then take off and, keep taking trips throughout the entire year? So she's hires tours and like schedules tours and a bunch of stuff. I mean, just like this drop-offs, the connecting flights to how long we're going to stay in the hotel. The very next morning, we have a car picking us up, taking us to the next tour. I mean, it's crazy. It's back to back. It was kind of stressful. I got to a point where, man, this is not a vacation. This feels like work in a way. I had like 1 hour, 2 hour delays, and it just hit the ground running again. But
I think you lost your calling, bro. You need to be one of those like influencer travel destination people.
Yeah. I thought about that so many times. Changed my career. But the beautiful thing about our mortgage industry is that it's really virtual, a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
Especially with technology, you have Zoom.
Yeah.
So, you know, it used to be you had a brick and mortar, you meet with clients in person, but sometimes the clients don't want to have to drive after work or during work hours,
Yeah.
come to the office location, spend about an hour, you're building rapport and talking,
Yeah.
and then they're going back. So, I mean, they're honestly killing about an hour and a half to 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
That's unproductive. That, you know, taps into their family life. At nighttime, it's hard. Zoom bridges that gap. But now I'm like, well, okay, well, how far can I take this? So I've done pre-approvals in France at like 11 o'clock at night. They're 9 hours ahead. I'm like, it's cool. All I'm doing is just talking with the phone, going over some numbers.
Yeah.
Right. And that's pretty much it. And just, you know, virtualize the entire process. And then you have to have good systems and support in place. When you have that, then you can take off. Yeah. Then you can do what you need to do. You know that the back end support's there. As long as you do everything up front, you're good.
Yeah. What do they say? The mother of invention is necessity. How does it go?
I don't know.
Cass, today we were talking about how market conditions were changing in real estate and how we needed to really increase our sphere and the penetration we have in our overall market by leveraging a lot of the social media and whatnot. We're not the kind of guys that are like, what's up, bro? And, you know, that kind of thing, because, you know, we're busy, number one. Number two, I ain't got time to edit and do all that. It's not, it's not my generation. I ain't going to lie. However, as the market condition, knowing what cycles we go through, I'm like, wait a minute, I need to change my penetration rate. I need to change a lot of things. And so out of necessity, started forcing that in, right? But as a lot of times, even as agents, not having the need to double down in a specific area that's really important, like scripting or their marketing campaigns or their CRMs, looking at their conversion rates until they don't have any business.
Yeah.
Then when you have no business, all of a sudden you're like, man, I need to do XYZ. I need to jump into XYZ. And it's strange to me, even now, so this is why I tried to do it a couple of years ago. Before it gets to that point, let me start working on this thing now in preparation for what's to come. And in your situation, being the traveler that you are, you had to come up with different models of being able to work remotely.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Assistance, moving, client connectivity.
Yeah. Even recording. You know, I go to Philippines twice a year, and each time I go there, I batch record my videos. So I just came back in June and I batch recorded 65 videos. So, I mean, and then plus it's a tax write-off. So you go there, you're doing business.
Yeah.
So now you're doing business as you're traveling, so it becomes a write-off. But yeah, you have to streamline the process. You have to have back-end support. And I think a lot of agents and loan officers, they look during the downturn to find ways to improve their business. But you got to constantly be doing these things in and out of good and bad times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, and you know, it's funny, as you mentioned it too, I look at, like, I work with a lot of different agents in different parts of the country, right, where I'm licensed.
Yeah.
California, Oregon, Washington, Florida, Texas. And so I find that more agents in lower volume or higher units, lower volume areas hustle more than the Bay Area. This is
That's really weird, bro.
Because you got a Bay Area, you're like the epitome of Silicon Valley, right? You're going to think and be ahead of the technology, getting ahead of video and all these things, especially YouTube being headquartered in Mountain View, right? So, but they're not. A lot of people are not taking advantage of it. And on top of that, they've been getting coached from Tom Ferry, Brian Buffini. Hey, do video and drilling it in their heads, and they're still not doing it as much, which baffles me. And same thing with loan officers, equally.
Okay. This goes back to comfort. This is how I know we live in really good times. They close 3 or 4 transactions a year, and they're happy with the level of income to get by. That's really what it boils down to. You talk to an agent that's in like Norma, Oklahoma, and they're closing like 200 deals a year.
Yeah.
And every deal they close is like the amount of an appraisal. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, dude, how are you doing it? But in order for them to survive in their specific market area, because of the average amount of commission per transaction, they don't know anything different.
Yeah.
That's just what they do. This is how we have to run our business. We can learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
You know? But on the opposite side, and I was telling my buddy Brandon that came in, I'm eventually going to write a book on this, only because the only way you can see this is by being in the business for at least 20 years, paying attention to all these different micro psychologies in different marketplaces, not just with people in the industry, but the consumers and where they live. You've heard the analogy of a New York minute, right? How fast is a New York minute?
Yeah.
Super quick. You think about the level of productivity you have to have in order to sustain a livable wage to live in Manhattan.
Yeah, and you adapt. Yeah, 100%.
Right?
100%. You know, it's funny you touch on consumer psychology. It's interesting when I'm working with different clients and I see how they think about the finance process. So what I find outside of the Bay Area, people care more about the experience, the hand-holding approach, can I trust this loan officer to take care of this finance? They're not so much, rate driven, right? In Silicon Valley, where they're engineers, they're rate driven. They care less about experience, more about, hey, what do the numbers look like? Now, I have to go into finance strategies. I have to go into the, really taking an educational approach and more hand-holding to up my value when they're comparing it to other, like say bank LOs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very different approach geographically.
I think that's a great point though, because bank LOs, just that in itself is a different animal.
Yeah.
When you have clients that walk through the door because of the stagecoach that they have on the building, the relationship is with the stagecoach. It's not the relationship with the individual, whereas true mortgage bankers and what we do, and we're purchase-oriented lenders where we're working with agents, and those agents are betting on us with their commissions to make sure that those deals are good, that the client has a great experience, they're getting a great program, great rate, great advice, and they get that extra hand-holding that a lot of times the banks don't provide. But those same guys that are sitting there, typically, I'm not going to say all of them because I do have friends that work in the banks. Maybe we'll have them on.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily as dedicated with an agent relationship as they would be working through the consumer and maintaining the name of the brand they're working with.
Yeah.
Which is different. And a lot of times, even in their pricing model, they can have horrible operations, which ironically, I tell people that you're usually going to get 2 out of 3 things. You're either going to get a low interest rate, you're going to get great operations, or you're going to get great compensation. Pick 2 out of 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Because if you have low interest rates and you have horrible operations, which is bad pull through, bad customer experience, 9 to 5 operating hours, nobody's available on the weekends to talk to, credit union that will be unnamed, but can give even programs like VA a bad rap.
Yeah.
Because they specialize in, quote, VA, and then agents will see VA as the bad loan and not recognize it was the institution that was giving poor performance, but yet they got that great rate.
Yeah.
If they got it without lock extension fees and losing the deal.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, a lot of, big banks, big box lenders put a bad name towards certain types of programs, and and the experience makes a world of difference. So,
but it makes sense though, because if those banks are treating people like another number, and the guys that are shopping for the cheapest rate are treating you like a clerical role, that's a marriage made kind of in heaven. Hey, you dude, I told the guy one time, you want a cheap loan? Write this down. DoYourOwnLoan.com. I literally told him that.
Yeah.
Write this down. If you go online and you type in DoYourOwnLoan.com, you will literally process your entire loan by yourself. You can.
That's an actual real website?
That's an actual real website.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So you go in there, you price your loan in, but now you're the dude.
Yeah.
You're like the processor. You're like getting all that stuff. You got to go get your tax transcripts, upload those, go to the Social Security website, upload those, pay the fee, pay the appraisal fee right there, pay for the credit report right there. Wow. Every time you want to run like like you pay for everything. And dude, just to manufacture a loan is like, I want to say like $2,500 up front.
Oh,
so you got to ante up all the supplemental fees you got to pay just to get your loan started that they don't see. Plus, how many clients do you know that are that disciplined enough where they're not taking a janky photo of their W-2s and uploading it that's legible?
Yeah.
Could you imagine what that guy's going to go through? Ping pong, ping pong, ping pong. Hey, here's my, what do you mean? That's my pay stub. What do you mean you need another one? What do you mean you're missing the last page of my bank statement? What do you mean?
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm still baffled at such website like that.
Yeah, dude.
I didn't know.
It's like getyourownloan.com. But case in point, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So how do you marry then a high level customer service experience, traveling the world, putting it in an automated process, but yet still giving them that feel good experience?
Great question. So a combination of things, right? One, I do a lot of education up front. So before we even start the pre-approval process, I'm doing a lot of consult up front. When we have them pre-approved, we have a whole educational process from that point on. We send them the pre-approval letter. Then we set up a time to go over the consultation. We walk them through the finance strategies, what they're pre-approved for, what the options are, what I personally recommend, which that gives me the positioning of, hey, here's how my value add. Here's what I recommend. You wanted to go in there with the 20% down. That sounds great. And, historically based on old school, yeah, that's great. That's what you've been told by your parents. But here's a better way, and here's how it's going to earn you more wealth throughout the process or throughout your time. Yeah. So just taking that approach, giving a completely different strategy. They're not going to get a big box lenders or credit unions for that matter. That creates more value. And then when I drip more email and video content throughout, up until the point that, we submit the offer gets accepted, and it's entire in-process videos that happens within there. In our system, once we have a contract received and we set up, there's an email that gets triggered out. Appraisal order gets triggered out. Email gets sent out to the listing agent, buyer's agent, the buyer itself, and the escrow officers. Like just all these automations, you just pre-build and do it up front. It creates a great experience. And the biggest complaint that most folks have is communication. If you bridge that gap and you're over communicating, no one's complained about that. People complain about lack of communication.
Right.
So, but now when I set all this up, I'm like, all right, great. I have operations take care of it. I did my work up front. I set it up to correctly. Now I can go and, check out the Eiffel Tower or whatnot.
Yeah. Back in the day, one of the things I learned from one of my mentors, we used to call it the pressure curve. The more pressure you put on the front end of a transaction, the less pressure you have throughout the transaction over time. Yeah. Super simple. But if you cut the corners and you cut all those steps in the very beginning, the pressure curve flips. Then the closing date's coming up real quick and you're chasing pay stubs, bank statements, W-2s, tax returns. Hey, can you give me the divorce decree? Pull out that child support. I'm blah, 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 blah. And they're like, dude, I'm trying to get my stuff packed.
Yeah, that's horrible. I hate that. Early in my career was like that. It was stressful and I didn't understand why. Why is it happening to me? But I didn't take the victim approach. Say, well, what can I do to improve and fix it? And then now it's like, okay, do everything up front, even up to the point where when you do the pre-approval, after that point, submit it to your underwriter and get it fully underwritten prior to getting a contract.
Right.
It's a guaranteed, unless, something changes to go and buy a nice car. They take on a whole lot, a new debt, things that we don't know because it's a financial snapshot, right? Being able to continue doing what you're doing and same thing for the client.
So that's what separates working really within a bank. Why I would never work inside of a bank personally. You don't have control of the transaction as much as that. You don't have it to that level. And then a lot of the area of focus for a lot of companies, that clerical role that they see, they're doing car loans, credit cards, blah, 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 cross-selling a bunch of other stuff instead of just being a specific master in the mortgage space.
Yeah.
Because that in itself, there's so many different varieties of structuring transactions. For some people, it may not make sense to put that much down payment.
Yeah.
It may not make sense to have mortgage insurance separate from the payment. Yep. Having it maybe baked into, or you do like an upfront MIP where you pay it off in advance, whatever it may be. But those really difficult questions of like, how long do you really see yourself living in this place? Do you want to buy the rates down? Maybe you don't. Maybe if you're only here for a short term because you're planning on getting relocated, there's so many different factors that just going online and picking that one item right there. And the thing that really bothers me is having to necessarily explain that over and over and over and over. Because when people get it or they don't get it. But when you're shopping for gas and you pull up to the corner and there's like 4 gas stations there. In reality, majority of lenders are like the same thing as those gas. They're a penny difference from one another.
Yeah.
Maybe a nickel.
Yeah.
And do you really want to cut across all the traffic just to save yourself, 20 cents on your pump? That's essentially what you're doing.
Yeah.
But when you realize the value, especially with the agent partners, like I have so many agent partners that won't even take an offer without me looking at the offer personally, because they know that even if I'm not dealing with the transaction, that the sellers also have an experience that they have to go through. Mm. And if you have, like, I don't know about you guys in Northern Cal right now, but in Southern Cal, we're having a lot of fallout. I'm seeing a lot of transactions. The pull-through rate, I haven't seen it deteriorate to this level. Mm-hmm. I think because people got qualified maybe 3-6 months ago, rates were a bit lower.
Yeah.
People half-fasting it, right? So ratios are a big deal. The other one I had the other day where we have a lot of fire zones in our areas here. So insurance could be a couple $100 more per month. You add on to that a solar lease of another $150, $350 a month in payment can blow a deal up.
Yeah. Throw off the DTIs for sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot more little nuances ahead of time. And so when the sellers are planning on getting that moving truck, they're going across country, things like that, how hyperly important it is to work with someone that you're essentially putting a winning bet on.
Yeah.
Very different.
Very different. Yeah.
So now that you do all this traveling, you got your systems in place with automations, you're doing the high touch, and now you're starting to move into more investment strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny. I flipped homes and I didn't really buy my first primary home till late 2000s. It was 2018. Mm-hmm. My first primary home. Mm-hmm. I flipped throughout the process, and I'm seeing all these clients who are making so much money in the equity, hundreds of thousands of dollars. From 2016 to 18 was a huge upswing of equity gain, especially in Northern California.
Yeah.
And I thought, I think what we provide is a finance tool, right? It gets you to build that financial, that wealth house or box or whatever, whatever the analogy is. And I think that the natural progression for any loan officer eventually, and real estate agent for that matter, is to get to a point where they're investing. Mm-hmm. They're investing to real estate because they're creating wealth for themselves. And then they're taking what they've learned and then sharing that with their clients, which separates the value add completely from any other agents who's just still renting.
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me. Like, for example, if you're listing a person's house and what can I do to renovate the house for the least amount of money that gives the best equity increase, right? Mm. So I can sell for top dollar. Someone who's a real estate agent who's flipped homes or has a sizable portfolio can educate the client and say, hey, here's what I would do. Here's how I would go about it. Mm-hmm. Here's the cost-effective approach, and here's renovation style and strategy. So I think it's really important. But I'm big, when I got the bug of traveling, I'm like, well, how do I create more passive income? I want to be able to travel more. Still do the same business, but travel. And, when I come back from travel, you have to, kind of hustle again, pick up the business, fun deals, go back out there.
Re-engage, get all your relationships back up and running, make sure everybody's touching base.
Exactly. And then
work.
Work. Right.
It's part of the business. I said we wear 3 hats.
Yeah.
One's our sales hat, one's our underwriting hat.
Yeah.
And the other one's pipeline management.
Yeah. Yeah. And then within each of those hats, there's like so many facets.
Yeah.
We're talking about sales. Sales is marketing too, right? Constantly marketing, sales, operations, fulfillment, retention, all that. Like it's a lot that goes behind it. But yeah, and I always look at like the numbers when I'm qualifying folks. You're gonna buy $1 million house. Say hypothetically, you're gonna spend say $5,000 a month, right? PITI. Well, that's money exiting. And so I go back to like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. It's all about cash flow.
Yeah.
If money's coming into your income statement, that's cash flow. That's asset. If it's exiting, it's a liability.
Right.
So when you're buying a house, you're exiting, cash flow. So it becomes a liability. How do you offset that? So whatever money you earn, you keep. You can pay back towards, on top of the mortgage payment. So you accelerate paying it off faster, cut interest costs, or just take that money you make and reinvest it into other assets that give you more cash flow. And that's when it spawned like, hey, my first thing was build an ADU. Then, you know, how do I maximize that? Is it short-term rental? Is it mid-term rental? And what's the pros and cons for both? Long-term, what's the, you know, what I really want to deal with and type of income appetite I'm looking for. And then flipping homes, you know, that's very transactional. It's not so much passive. But how do you take the money you earn from those net proceeds and put it back into reinvesting it for long-term assets that give you grow again? Yeah, it's just compounding the whole process. So my entire shtick is like, okay, eliminate cash flow exiting, right? Minimize liability, increase assets, so cash flow comes in. I'm just reinvesting all that, and that's how, you know, the evolution of being a loan officer to now flipper, investor, spawned.
Right. It's, you know, I think it's great though, because I think it makes you a much more rounded person in the industry. But I do believe, and I've made the mistake before when I've done flips, is that you make emotional decisions. And that's one of the unfortunate things within our industry. Because, I mean, I'm sure you dealt with agents that are not as analytical as you are. And they're much more emotional, vested in the transaction.
Yeah.
But when you have emotion as the decision-making factor, that's where you start making the mistakes. Because that's hope, faith. Oh my God, if I get this thing, I can totally get $2 million for this place.
Yeah, the woo-woos.
Right?
Yeah.
Let me ignore all the low comps. I want to ignore that, or ignore the direction of the market itself, or whatever it may be, right? So, but I think 100% right, bro. I think that being that what we do in our industry, it provides us with such an opportunity to be able to take advantage. So rather than being a person that facilitates the transaction, being a participant.
Yep.
Different model.
Completely
different model. And, you know, when that mindset shifts, it's amazing. I had an underwriter, bro. She was literally like the number one underwriter in the company. She did the most volume. She was fast. She was harsh. We won't talk about her personality, but there's a reason why she was hardcore.
Yeah.
And one day I was flipping a property, and I had been doing it for a while, and I walked into her office, and there was a transaction where a guy was picking up a property to flip. And first of all, she didn't like it because she's like, man, this guy has already gotten like 3 or 4 mortgages in the last couple years, blah, blah, blah. And he just got rid of this one, and he's making like 75 grand. And you can tell like the level of disgust in her, right? Like from a jealousy standpoint.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't even say jealousy, because she was very like commie-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
One of those. Okay.
One of those. It was really random, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, wait a minute.
Despite meeting the guidelines.
Yeah.
Besides that. Okay.
Yeah. And she's like, you know, I don't know, because this guy's he's churning houses, and I'm like, well, it's not illegal for you to buy and move if you're going to say you're going to live in it, and you're living in it, and you just sold the last house.
Yep.
Like, there's nothing wrong with this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But the fact that he was just making this amount of money that was going through, and not everybody makes a lot of money on flips, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You know, right? But if you do position yourself correct, you can make, you know, 100 grand, a couple hundred. I've made 750 on some deals. But when you go into some of those things, so the level of disgust in her was crazy. So I sat back with her and was like, wait a minute. Do you know what you know? Like, you look at appraisals all day and audit the hell out of an appraisal. So you know, just from glancing at it, based on the calculations of the appraiser, what's a good value on a specific property.
Yeah.
Like, you're that good. That's number one. Number two, you look at tax returns all day long. And I've gotten so many tricks and tips off of seeing how people facilitate their personal finances and building an LLC and how they hide stuff and moving this into a blah, 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 renting to their corporation, put the corporation to do the Airbnb, pay their kids salaries. Like, I've seen so many.
Gray waters.
And they start, you know, putting the money for their wife that's not working on the payroll, and then putting her on a 401k that's now counted as reserves on our end and not counted as a loss on income. I'm like, oh my God, this is genius. You are the most talented person doing the most volume, and you have every potential to do this, but you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy to me. I mean, and not everyone's cut out for it, right? It's one thing, even if they see the tricks, they know how to navigate and go about it. It's the lack of action that most folks don't take, and that's really important. You know, it's just like they did a statistic on like courses, digital courses. There's only about like a less than 5% or 6% success rate of taking a course online and actually succeeding and
I'm
implementing
guilty, bro.
I've done.
I get about 60, 75 of them. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The execution. I mean, it's not for everyone, but
I'm like, I get the
see it
concept.
like,
I'm gonna go. That's me. I'm like, I get the concept. I'm good.
Yeah.
But no, you know what? I have done it. When I did it with Thatch Nguyen, I coached with him for about over 2 years, and a lot of it happened to be very repetitive because we did happen to have a lot of recirculating investors going in and out of the process, which was great. But taking a step back, learning how he needed to behave as an investor. So he had his daily routine, waking up early, going to the gym, having his green coffee, doing his meditations, knowing his vision. One time he started to doing his dials, all these different, very systematic in the way he operated. Then when he picked up his properties, very specific on the buckets of making decisions. There's no emotion involved in it. So if it was going to be because it's generating cash flow and the rate of return after sale, whether I should flip it, wholesale it, and the value of time. Because sometimes it's better just to wholesale a property and get a $35,000 assignment fee than it is to flip a property making $60,000 or $75,000 on a flip. After you spend time, energy, and effort and taxes, you end up going back to making that $35,000.
Yep.
When all you had to do was sign some paperwork and boom, boom, and it's it.
Yeah.
That was like the aha moment. Whoa, wait a minute. This is different. But when we started the ADU company, I remember a while back we were at the bar and I was explaining to you when we were starting this company about the ADU stuff, right? Like, bro, remember that?
Yeah,
I was like, bro, let me pencil this out for you real quick. Let me show you something.
All good originating ideas, right? It's napkins.
That was pre-COVID.
Yeah,
was that pre-COVID?
Yeah.
That was pre-COVID. But, that was the funny thing, breaking that stuff out. I was like, man, watching Thatch go through multi-unit builds and doing the same thing and the math and the calculations, it wasn't even algebraic. It was elementary level math.
Yeah.
But just taking the time to analyze it. I'll show you that after we're done with our recording today. But that was a game changer.
Yeah.
And I think even if you take a course, it's really important to really understand the premise of where the instructor's coming from.
Yeah.
It's not just the understanding of how to, it's the mindset that's built within. To your point, that underwriter didn't have the right mindset. Every skill, every bit of knowledge available to do it, every bit of knowledge, but just not even a matter of execution, didn't have the right mindset in the way she was looking at it.
Yeah.
It was from a victim mentality instead of looking at it as a opportunity. Some people look at these beat up properties as like, oh my God, this is a problem. It's going to take so much money.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at it as, whoa, this is a straight up opportunity.
Yeah. It's a cash cow waiting to be had. Yep.
Yeah. That's the biggest mindset shift I saw,
Yeah.
But so anyhow, I think you're right in terms of for agents, and it's important for us to really dive into that part of the business.
Yeah.
Because that's really what's going to take us away from the day-to-day grind and building up a portfolio. And it's nothing crazy. Do one a year, maybe one every couple years.
Yeah.
And as you continue to supplement your housing cash flow and down markets like today, as volume starts to come down, you have that supplementary income coming in.
Yeah.
And it's just a math problem.
100%, and you got to look at different asset classes. Like what works in this market is different from what works 2 years ago. 3 years ago, you could flip a property, make handsome amount, hand over fist. Now it's like, you got to rerun the numbers. And that's what separates rookies from people who are experienced. Like they look at the numbers very carefully. They factor all things considered, bad market conditions, fair, and great. But within all these three, you have all, you're very detailed and running all the numbers. So like in today's market, how I would play it, people are concerned about cash flow, say buying a property to get cash flow, passive income. There's Section 8. It's guaranteed by the government. No matter what happens in COVID, you're still getting a guaranteed check from the government, right? And so you can get a property, under $100,000 for a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, and cash flow and net $550 per month. You could do that every couple of months. Every time you close a deal, take a certain amount of that proceeds, put into a piggy bank that adds up that savings to use for the down payment. And to your point, you don't have to go and buy, tons of houses all at the same time. Just slow and steady process. If you buy one house a year in 10 years, you got 10 houses. In 20 years after that, your houses are paid off more or less, right?
Yeah. Find the beat up
then
multi-unit.
you get cash flow. I mean, it's just great.
A beat up multi-unit with garages.
Yeah, that's another thing that's fascinating. What's happening in San Diego, I'm blown away. Like what
Bro, I didn't want to share with you some of the ancient Chinese secrets we got coming out.
Yeah, some Sun Tzu.
Dude, this is like straight ninja.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But it's one of the, and when I'll show you later on, it's actually the only market in California that is actually allowing for certain things. And so every market has been a test bed for different reasons. Los Angeles with rent controls, that's recently started to come around a lot more.
Oh, wow.
Tenant rights, we started to see some of those things roll into San Diego. We almost had a thing roll out back in, I think it was like June, where if you were going to not necessarily evict a tenant, you were going to terminate a lease. So if you had a lease for 12 months, if you wrote a lease for 12 months and you're like, hey, we're going to sell this property, that you were going to have to pay the existing landlord 3 months of rent plus moving expenses.
This is after the lease has expired?
If you have a 12-month lease, that they were going to have 3 months of rent covered, 3 months. So you have 12 plus 3 plus moving expenses. That was proposed. That's what was proposed. We don't have to do that right now.
Yeah.
It was for San Diego City and Chula Vista. And they ended up tweaking it. So now the owner doesn't have to pay it. They're like doing it with the city. And then under specific circumstances, like I want to say it's disability or age. But if you have a 12-month lease, that was going to get initiated. And it was something that I want to say that they started doing it in, I forget what part. But so, there's a lot of that's starting to happen too. So you get the opposite. You have density housing increase, which is one aspect of it. One of the things, and this is not to get so political, but this is actually politically driven. So obviously, that California, we have a lot of people moving out of state.
Yeah.
Right. Tons of reasons people moving out of state.
Yep.
Well, how do you continue to maintain the social programs you have in existence? How do you do that?
More tax.
You can charge more tax and you allow for migration. You have to now import people, allow people to come into the state to then provide future taxable revenue.
Incentives.
Which is one of the reasons why for California specifically, and I know this specifically I sat with a senator and went over this in detail, that it's common knowledge that they want to have a mass migration to come into California because so many Californians are moving out of the state. Therefore, we need to supplement that with additional bodies to continue to put tax dollars back into the state. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
And those people are not looking for the McMansions per se.
McMansion.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're looking for affordable housing.
Yeah.
Therefore, the incentive to create ADUs and multi-generational housing and that type of living standard is acceptable, what they believe, to that model. So
that makes a lot of sense now. So there's
crazy, right? I learned that in 2017, bro, before California rolled it out. Because I remember we did an event where we were pushing this to about 300 realtors. And I was blown away. And fast forward 5 years. And as we're seeing so many Californians of, not even of wealth, middle class, moving out of state, selling their properties, taking that cash, going to Texas, going to Vegas, going to Phoenix, wherever they're migrating out to. And then to offset that, we have these existing homeowners that are now having to supplement their housing income with ADUs and whatnots. Those individuals that are not going to fill that space with affordable housing is going to typically be, I'd say it, lower income individuals or migrants.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes sense, yeah.
So that's the back end incentive of it. So the question is, knowing that, how do you take advantage of something like that and put yourself ahead of the curve?
Well, I think it's for first and foremost is staying ahead of legislation. You know, a lot of people don't know this is like a recent law that passed a few months back that you can actually have 2 ADUs and a junior ADU.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know that. So just staying relevant and up to date with that type of information is key. Finding
but
properties.
that's actually to your point on that, something like that. And I gotta jump in here real quick because you are a lending expert. Mm-hmm. So, and the reason I'm saying this is because this is one of the traps that I've seen. Great option to create the cash flow, mm-hmm. because the city allows you to do the units. So typically, if you're going to add a junior ADU, you're going to get a deed writer. Has to be owner occupied. So now if you ever decide to sell the property and you got a junior ADU, you can only sell to owner occupied buyers. That's number one. Other things like Airbnb restrictions, you're going to have some other things that can come into play depending on your municipality.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is your financing. So if you do a duplex as a great example, a duplex with an ADU is ineligible for financing for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. So anybody that wants to purchase that property from you now is going to have to pay cash, get a DSCR loan or some kind of loan that has a different kind of terms, mm-hmm. not as typically favorable as the regular, A paper type of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it can affect your marketability on a property.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point. And at that, so you just get the financing, close, then
yeah, that's why I had to jump in there real quick.
Yeah,
it's awesome. It's a great option to create an abundance of cash flow. You can turn a single family residence into 3-4 doors legally, right? However, you just made that property with new types of restrictions. Mm-hmm. So just because the city may allow it or the municipality may allow it, you may shoot yourself in the foot if you're planning on doing a short-term hold. Yeah. Because now you want to sell that property and it falls under commercial or all-day or these weird financing types. Yeah. You killed your pool of potential buyers, mm-hmm. right? So that's just a consideration. I think you have to sit down with someone like you in general just to make sure you map that out. Yeah.
I mean, align towards your end goal and objective, right? So if it's a short term, if it's you're going to hold it for 2, 4 years, 5 years, whatever, you have to align towards that. So your project's got to be, aligned towards what your exit is. I feel, for me personally, if I'm buying a house and it has a good amount of lot size and I'm converting a garage and adding a junior ADU and maybe another ADU that's attached, I'm holding on to the property.
Yeah, lot splits.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking all this extra cash flow, you're putting it back into your mortgage, you're paying off your home in less than 12 years. That's retirement. I mean, how many of these do you need to have, especially in Silicon Valley? Each ADU is going to generate anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500.
Bro, that's why I don't even understand. Like places like San Jose, where they make it like San Jose is now barely starting to like adopt the whole ADU concept, which is ironic to me because I came from San Jose. Yeah. So I think I told you before, my parents had an ADU, converted garage. My grandparents had one that was converted. My aunt and uncle have one. My uncle have one now. My in-laws have one. So back in the 80s, and especially when Silicon Valley was booming, everybody had a converted garage. Everybody had like an ADU, right?
Yeah.
And then the market shifted. The early 2000s, especially during the .com, all my friends were all in the business. It was like Bitcoin back in the day. It was like cryptocurrency, bro. It was crazy. It was like crypto, dude. It was weird seeing this crypto market, the panacea that people were living in the crypto space.
Yeah.
When I remember being in my early 20s, seeing my friends talking about, investing in Seagate and this other company and Applied Materials and dude, did you see I got blah, 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 and these, right?
Yeah.
And then poof, everything crashed.
Yeah, that's crazy.
.com, boom, .com bust. But during that time frame, if you look at the building that was done, especially in the Bay Area, how many McMansions went up, dude?
Yeah, a lot. They were building a lot.
A grip.
Yeah.
That concept of the McMansion lifestyle shifted. Now it's a matter of downsizing and maximizing comfort, ease, having that liquidable cash flow, being able to travel, quality of life became much more important than having this big McMansion. I know because I live that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
But definitely a shift in mindset. So I'm glad to see that at least San Jose is starting to open that door. San Diego's been way more accommodative for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely different.
Yeah, they have to abide by, California's legislation now. So,
but why is that though? Like Morgan Hill's a good example. Why is it that they just restrict so much housing?
I don't know.
There's all that land. Every single time I drive through the area, I'm like, they talk about being landlocked.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, there's so much to build.
There is, yeah. I mean, I think part of that, those roads or those plots of lands deal with farming. So that could block some things, but I don't know. It's just Santa Clara County it's a little bit of a doozy sometimes. Even getting the permitting process for certain things is difficult and very rigid. Like I remember I was trying to convert a dead space, kind of like a nook, into a third bedroom, and you have to have a certain amount of feet width and length, and I was shy by like half a foot, so I couldn't convert it. I mean, there's certain things like that, nuances. The depth to the refrigerator compared to the following adjacent wall, like it's just it's weird. Yeah. There's a water heater that's installed after a flood. It had to be elevated now, so it can't be in a basement, which I understand, but still, it's
that's one of the things too. I think when we started the construction company, I didn't want to get involved in it because I already have enough to deal with on the lending side and understanding the entire concept of that. Mm-hmm. But a good byproduct of that was now the operations managers and people that I work with now, they know all the technical nuances, right? Because it's really not that easy. It's easy, but it's not that easy.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes behind actual construction. Fix and flip, like lipstick on a pig. When you're doing cosmetics, it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
But when you're breaking down, demoing walls, you have to have architectural plans and engineering in place. That gets tricky. And you got to have it goes back to having the right people on your team. Mm-hmm. You got to have the right players in your team that know what they're doing, that can navigate through all that stuff.
So question for you then. What would Eric today tell 25-year-old Eric, knowing what you know now?
Jesus Christ. Wow. Well, my 25-year-old version's a wild, man. Good luck telling him anything. Yeah. But, I mean, I would say get focused and take the small baby steps and invest in yourself, invest in real estate. So my perspective changed. During my 20s, I was having a lot of fun, right? And so I'm like, well, I can have even better fun with no limitations of money if I just took this time and a little bit extra time, invested in myself, invested in my future, built a sizable portfolio early on, invested in the stock market, right? And then now I have a greater amount of time to spend with close friends. I saw a quote recently, is like, it's not about capitalism being bad. What capitalism is a tool for you to spend more time, or is a tool for you to spend more time with the people you care most about sooner. You know what I mean? So it's just a means to get you to have quality of life. Yeah.
Imagine how much more travel you would have done.
Oh, shit. Yeah. I mean, my lifetime goal is 100 countries. So, yeah, I would have done a lot.